Welcome back to the Snowpoint Cast. Today we're going to be interviewing Jay Lesage, who got first in the seniors division in 2010. Welcome to the show, man. How you been? I haven't seen you in like a year.
Man, I've been amazing. Honestly, just been chilling out. I've just been enjoying the weather as it stands. You know how it is, bro. Brushing up on old decks.
Word. What kind of old decks have you been playing?
Honestly, my girlfriend and I just reprinted like all the 2010 suite. So I got the four main world decks. So I got Lux Chomp, I got Gyarados, I got GG, I got all that stuff. And then like I screwed around with like a few other ones just for fun. Just working on the collection.
It's always solid to be building more decks for sure. What's the fourth deck that you built? Because you said Gyarados, Lux Chomp, GG.
Oh, Jump Love for sure.
Oh, Jumpluff. See, my fourth deck that I have in that rotation is Dialga Chomp. Why do you play like Jumpluff in that rotation over like Dialga Chomp?
I think Jump Love is something that came out as super fresh because that was like HGSS was the first set from the new block that got released, and it really showed the power creep. I mean, the sequencing of Jump Love is similar to what you see nowadays with like fast aggression, but the difference is now it's supporter draw. Back then it was Pokemon draw, right?
Right.
So I think Jump Love was something that was ahead of its time while coexisting within its time period.
That's interesting.
If that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. The thing about Jumpluff that I hear a lot about is that it's kind of like, I mean, obviously it's fun to play in a vacuum when you're playing other 2010 decks, that's whatever, but I've heard that it's like kind of low tier in terms of like power in 2010. Like I've heard it's on the lower end compared to some other decks.
It's definitely on the lower end. I thoroughly enjoy it because it feels like 2018 meets 2010.
Oh, it's kind of broken.
It's it's a very fun comparison, but it definitely is not representative of being the fourth strongest deck at the time. Although I do enjoy its matchups against the other core three decks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so speaking of matchups, we're going to start talking about Lux Chomp. So first off, what led you to play Lux Chomp for Worlds in 2010?
It's just the best deck. I mean, you're going to hear this everywhere, but the reason what made it really the best deck was that it's just because it could target literally any Pokemon on the board any given time. It had pure consistency fired out of it. It had defense in the form of Power Spray. It had access to all these broken SP tools like Energy Gain, SP Radar. The deck was just optimized to not only have a good matchup against everything, but to actually have a favorable matchup against most things. I mean, very minimal things could stop a Lux Chomp deck because it doesn't just draw prize cards, it also sets you back by knocking out your key players, right?
And then also gets itself ahead by healing damage off all the time. Like it just does everything.
Exactly. It literally it's like maybe I could beat Lux Chomp with this, and it's like, psych, I got this sick Poke Power,
Heal everything, bruh.
Yeah. So it's just unbeatable.
Yeah, it's definitely really good. So how was it like a meta read, or like how did the meta unfold in your games leading up to first? Like did the meta unfold the way that you thought it was going to at the beginning of the event?
I'm gonna be honest, like looking back at it back in the day, I didn't even like think about meta shares. Like I know that sounds kind of ridiculous to think about and now, but I feel like back then, like you kind of just went into a tournament with your deck and you just drop the bomb,
I mean, you were the guy who won, so it's tough to argue with that.
I'm not even trying to cap right now, but you literally just walk up in the tournament and you're just like, I brought my 60 cards and we're just gonna go. I mean, like, we talked about matchups back in the day, but I guess that this was at the lower end of like the internet era when like you actually saw stats.
Yeah, Six Prices was definitely really fresh in 2010. It'd been around, but it only really started to like get popularity into like 2012-ish.
Yeah, and people cared less back then too, because like about meta shares, because most decks had more even matchups and there was more room to finesse your way out of winning certain games.
Right.
But in terms of it, I knew I was going to play a lot of mirror. That was the one thing that I did know, and that was correct. But there was all sorts of mirror. Like there was Mewtwo's being like Mewtwo level X's being thrown in.
Right.
There was one guy, Kari was his name, from Finland. He had like a 1/1/1 Gardevoir in his deck, which was nuts.
Yeah,
to
that's
copy
insane.
Cyrus, which is like
double Cyrus every turn seems all right.
It seems pretty freaking busted.
Seems pretty okay.
And yeah, so there was that. I mean, there was lots of everything. The only thing that really caught me off guard was like this Dawn fan deck in top 8, played by Toya Nishimaki, and besides that, everything else was super standard. Oh, and in the finals, the Michael Bryan with his cute Azelf Mesprit Yuxi tech, like that thing caught me off guard. I'd never played against that.
Is it the downer material Azelf you're talking about?
Yeah, the downer material one. So like all my basics cost an extra energy.
Yeah.
Super rough if you don't get a hold on the matchup.
Yeah, and like that tech is such a good tech. I think that's like one of the things that, you know, it surprised you in finals, but if the meta were as advanced back in the day as it were today, that would be a very common tech. Like it's very clearly good against SP, and like if the meta were as diverse as it was today, like if people knew about cards and talked about cards as much as they do today, I feel like that would have been a much more played card at Worlds.
Yes, I feel like it would have leaked out more. I'm very happy that it didn't.
As the champion, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not a very fun matchup, but I mean, it's definitely winnable. And it's nothing. It's you don't have less than a 40% chance of winning that matchup.
Right.
And you don't have more than a 55% chance.
Yeah, and there's stuff you can do, but it's definitely. Downer material also is a really good tech against SP. Okay, so were there any like tight games in leading up to first? Like, were there any games where like, man, if I like missed one turn of attacking or something that I like not would have won that year? Like, is there any games like that you had?
Yeah, I had two main ones that were like insane. So I actually have one that's like on YouTube. Like this guy recorded the whole game on YouTube,
Really?
and you can watch it. It was my round 7. I lost the game. It was the one game I dropped, but it was against Aaron Chung. He's playing Dialga Chomp. It was the craziest it was nuts. My breath was taken out of my body.
I'm so excited.
It was like I needed to like have Crobat drops at the end of the game to win, so I like sequenced all my powers, and he like he power sprayed my Crobats at like the optimal time to ensure that certain knockouts wouldn't happen. I used my Crobat to Toxic Fang his Dialga G with 4 medals on it. Because at that point you're doing minus 40. There's no other way around.
Yeah,
so
right. You have to do something else.
I Toxic Fang and managed to take down the Dialga
with Toxic.
Like, yeah,
wow.
With the Toxic Fang.
That's crazy.
And like, bro, I still lost. Like it was
it was
an insane game.
So rewinding a little bit, obviously both of us know because we're knowledgeable about 2010, but when you say sequencing your powers in an SP mirror, that's a really important thing to be doing. Dive into that a little bit. Like, what do you mean when you mean sequencing powers, and why is that important in an SP mirror?
Yeah, of course. It's a very good point to highlight that, because I know that for any players who have maybe joined in the last year or so who want to get into retro decks, is a really important thing to highlight. So Power Spray was a really format defining card where obviously SP decks could stop a Poké Power of their choice a few times a game.
Yeah.
So normally the opponent would precede that by pausing. So like, let's say hypothetically, like I'm a Gyarados deck and I'm playing a Crobat G down and using Flash Bite.
Yeah.
The SP player would then pause, look at their hand, regardless of whether or not they had the Power Spray, and then allow their opponent to use that ability or not.
Yeah, you used to have to almost like ask to use powers if you were playing against SP back in the day.
It was definitely weird when Power Spray rotated out. I remember being like still pausing, and then I was like, oh, I can't do that anymore.
I'm head gaming for no reason and just wasting time now.
Exactly. It was such a huge mental game. So in SP mirrors, one really big thing was like playing Poké Powers that were not relevant that could seem relevant. Like, for example, if you played an Azelf Legends Awaken and tried to use Time Walk, you could bait your opponent into thinking a prize that you had was extremely relevant to the game. Like, let's just say you prized a really important tech. Your opponent might think that and then spray you. But then the real power that you want to use that turn was your Yuxi to draw 7, you know? So lots of different things that you can do to bait your opponent into power spraying.
Especially with the amount of like power options that you have in an SP deck. Like you have Flash Bite, you can Bright Look, you can Healing Breath, you can Time Walk. Like there's so many powers that you have access to.
You can really bait out a lot of your opponent's power sprays if you just play the field right. I mean, obviously Yuxi is probably the number one thing that's going to get sprayed from you, but sometimes you can fake your opponent out into a favorable trade.
Yeah, and that's something that's so interesting is like coming down to the head game of Pokemon, because this is something that like top players know and they even discuss with one another, but it's something that the scene is not really that aware about. Like, let's say, for example, we're playing an SP mirror and I want to try to bait you with one of my powers. If I'm like really enthusiastic and I'm like, okay, I'm going to Bright Look your bench Pokemon, and then like there's ways that I can act that portray information so that you think that things are a certain way, even though they might not necessarily be that way. Like you were saying, like when you look at your hand every time, even though you don't have a power spray, you just force your opponent to be thinking, oh, he might have a power spray, you know?
Yeah, and this was like, I was playing as a senior, and this was a strategy that I learned from just like watching other seniors, because like when this card first came out, it wasn't always like that. Like the first month was a learning curve with the card, right?
Right.
And then it became more and more like, okay, like power spray is such a huge head game card.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably the most defining card of the TCG that's ever been able to be played on your opponent's turn.
Oh yeah,
I would only card, if not like
there is a couple other cards. So there's an Alakazam with a power that says, I think it's like you could discard 2 cards and it does the same thing. Yeah, power cancel. And then there was another one. I think there was an old trainer as well. I'll put a picture of it up. But yeah, it's very rare that you can play a card on your opponent's turn in the TCG for sure.
Yeah, it was super busted.
Okay, so talking a little bit about techs now. So in Lux Chomp, you didn't play a ton of techs. It was a pretty streamlined variant. What do you think about like BLG or like Blazikins and Fires in Lux Chomp? Because I know Dialga Chomp can be an issue sometimes, and it's like one of your closer matchups. So what do you think about the Blaziken tech?
Oh, see, the Blaziken tech I would see as more... it would gain more merit if there was Dialga Chomp being more prominent in the area, especially if a very strong player is running it. But I mean, for the most part, Dialga Chomp is extremely difficult to pilot. I mean, if the opponent is subpar to the Lux Chomp player, they can easily just lose. Mm-hmm. But I mean, when played correctly, Dialga Chomp, I would say, does have the edge against Lux Chomp very minimally, like extremely minimally.
Right.
It's so marginal. That matchup's insane.
It's such a fun matchup. I love that matchup.
But in terms of it, I mean, I would play Blaziken if I was expecting Dialga Chomp and Steelix in the area piloted. If the Dialga Chomp player had expertise, or if there was just a really average Steelix player, I'd probably tech Blaziken.
It's also really good for Steelix. Yeah, I even forgot about that. And Steelix is a really interesting variant. We were talking a little bit about Steelix before the cast. You said you thought Steelix should have won the event.
Yeah, I think in the Masters division that Steelix should have easily taken the event. I mean, it absolutely wrecks Lux Chomp. It has a really good GG matchup.
Yeah. Psychic resistance is pretty cool.
It can really go the distance against anything, even counters to the popular decks. So, like, think Dawn Fan, anything like that. But also, to kind of jump back to your previous point, if I really wanted to play a fire tech, though, I'd rather play an Entei Raikou Legend over the Blaziken, as I think Entei Raikou is much stronger. Okay,
so dive into Entei Raikou, just for those that don't know it. That's something that I actually have written down, and I was going to ask you next, so it's really funny that you bring it up. But yeah, so Entei Raikou Legend, there's a variant that actually I think got top 8. It was a Lux Chomp variant that played Entei Raikou Legend. What do you think about the Entei Raikou Legend tech?
I think it's juicy. I mean, it's a completely different deck, though. I mean, you're gaming for a completely different reason. And if I'm going to be quite frank with you, I think the Entei Raikou Legend really, if you use it in the mirror, you're going to bring it to sudden death. Like, almost 90% of the time. So, in my experience with Entei Raikou, I'm going to be real with you. I didn't test it that much going up to the event. I knew it was a thing.
Right.
I mainly didn't know how to deck build around it, but when I got to the tournament, I saw everyone pulling up with 4 copies of Pokécom, and they were like they had like extra Bebe search, and they had all these ways to get it out. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I kind of wish I thought of it. So I wish I had more insight into this. The one thing that I did know about Entei Raikou Legend, I might call it ERL from time to time, but is that it just dies to a promo croak. Toxicroak G promo. There we go.
That's a really common promo. I mean, that's a tech against Luxray, so it's just a tech that's going to be in a meta.
Yes, exactly, all the time. So I'm just like, if my opponent wants to whip out their Entei Raikou Legend on me, I'm just going to play down this Toxicroak G and just crank out tons of damage. And at the time, Entei Raikou is worth 2 prizes, so I mean...
Yeah, it's a lot. So you said that Entei Raikou actually plays a fair amount differently than regular Lux Chomp. Why is that?
Well, the main purpose of it, it's like multifold. So, like, for one, you can play the fire energy, and it can have a really strong purpose against Dialga Chomp. If they stack a Dialga with a lot of metals, it can be very tanky. So that's one. 2, it also, if you can play very strategically with it, you can use, I forget what the attack is called, but basically it hits all the Pokemon in play with Poke Powers on them, both yours and your opponent's. So you would need to play a Bronzong G. My list that year did not play a Bronzong G, which I'm surely touch on in this interview.
Yikes! I didn't even know that, to be honest. I haven't seen your list, but that is quite. I don't know how I feel about that.
That was intentional, and if I could go back in time, I would probably throw the Bronzong G in. Imagine winning world championships on the hard mode. You know?
Thunderfall is the name of the attack you're thinking about that drops to powers.
Yeah, so like basically the game plan with it was that you would drop Entei Raikou Legend, you would Bronzong G, move an energy from an SP Pokemon over to the Entei Raikou Legend, attach for turn,
Yep.
and then Thunderfall, and hopefully your opponent would have more Pokemon with Poke Powers in play than you would, and then you would win the game, or you'd bring it to sudden death in a game where you're losing.
Where you don't have a win condition. That's very interesting.
Yes, you don't have an active win con. So it was kind of like a reset button or a potential victory.
Yeah, that is a very like different way to play the deck for sure. And you do have to play Bronzong. So I mean, if you're not playing Bronzong, you can't play that card.
It was also very good against Jumpluff at the time. Jumpluff was not seeing a lot of play though. Like it was not popular until Yuka Furusawa won the juniors division with it.
Right.
I mean, Bluff was becoming more popular, but not until that win happened did it really explode.
Okay, so if you were to replay the event today, but in Masters, do you think you'd play the same deck, or do you think you'd play a Bronzong, or what?
I would throw a Bronzong in that bad boy.
Just so Bronzong plus a Bronzong, and then you're good to go?
Yeah, I would have screwed around more with VS Seeker. That card was extremely underrated in the format. I mean, could you imagine having access to 8 Cyrus? Like,
I mean, yeah, true. That is
or even just like you play 2 VS Seeker, having 6 for that matter. I think I would have switched my Night Maintenance out at that point.
Would you played Errands?
Yeah, I played Errands in my list. I would have played extra VS Seeker, cut the Night Maintenance, consider cutting the Chatot I played, and throw...
Which Chatot? Is Chatot G or the one with the free attack?
The one with the free attack. So shuffle your into your deck, draws many as your opponent.
Draws many as your opponent, that's right.
Because like that card was really great against Gardevoir matchups, but I didn't really play against Gardevoir that day.
Yep.
I could be wrong, but I don't think I hit a single GG that whole day.
Wow, that's crazy. Because I feel like GG is one of the best decks in the format.
I think I played against like 8 mirrors.
Wow.
So it was stupid. Yeah, I think it was mostly just like mirror and like other weird stuff. I could be wrong. I don't think I played against a single straight GG. But
wow,
basically, I would cut the Chatot most likely for the Bronzong had I had the same path. And I maybe would have played Premier Ball.
Oh yeah, Premier Ball is very good for sure. Okay, so you're obviously very skilled at the SP mirror. You've played some SP mirrors, and you played a bunch of them to get first. So if you had any advice for people who are trying to, honestly, I think one of the most fun interactive matchups is SP mirrors. It's so fun to play against someone else who's playing an SP deck. So if you had any advice for other people that are starting to get into 2010, or even that are in 2010 but might not know everything about SP decks, what would be your advice for someone piloting an SP deck?
It's not necessarily about getting the first prize. It's all about board position. It's all about energy drops. It's also a really big part of that is power spray. I really favor people playing call energy variants in their Luxray Garchomp lists. I like call energy a lot.
You play call too, I assume?
Yes, I play 4 call. I think the ability of going first and using call energy and having a power spray in your hand, going first against the opponent is too strong.
That's definitely very strong.
To also touch back on your previous point, I would have also thrown a Dragonite FB in my list.
Oh yes.
One of my closest games was top 4 against Haruki Yano, Japanese national champion. Guy played both counters. He played the Ambipom G and the Dragonite.
Wow.
And I was like, wow.
How did you win that game, to be honest? Because I feel like Dragonite is such a staple in SP mirrors because you have to have an answer to their Garchomp. So how did you even handle that?
Well, Dragonite was more of a staple in Dialga Chomp, but like in Lux Chomp, it was more Ambipom heavy. Which I can't explain to you why, but basically in that matchup, game 1, I actually went down 4 prize cards.
Wow.
And it was 6-2, and I caught up.
That's impressive.
So basically, he ran out of steam. He burned all of his Cyruses early, and if I recall correctly, I smoked so he's at 2 prizes. I'm at 6. I smoked the Garchomp. He exhausted like all of his double colorless and just like cannoned off, right?
Yeah.
Killed the first Garchomp. He sent up the next Garchomp. Whiffed a double colorless or something like that.
Oof, that's tough.
I was able to come back in, take out his other Garchomp, and then I power sprayed his Luxrays nonstop, and he couldn't get another prize.
Wow.
So yeah, it was nuts. I just had all the recovery in my options because he kept taking my Garchomps off the board. I'm like, if I can get them back and I can just exhaust his resources, I can probably win.
And that's so interesting that like that in that state of the game, when you're down that much, you need to power spray the Bright Look. When that in a different situation is the wrong power spray target.
Yes, usually you want your opponent to use the Bright Look, and you want to spray their Uxies, their Azelf,
right?
Their
the important ones.
Spraying Azelf is really big in that matchup because just having access to like your 6 prize cards and just being able to know which one is which, like that was a really big skill. And if you could just like pinpoint a key supporter, a key double colorless,
yeah, there's so much like resource control in 2010 that's like so important that knowing your prizes, it's a big deal if you have like an expert belt prized or an energy game prized.
Yeah, I remember I used to like lay out my prize cards like super weird to be like, oh, the card's here, this card's here, this card's here.
Interesting. So you had a different sequencing for laying out your prizes. That's interesting.
Yeah, I literally laid them out in like the order that I think I would need to draw them.
Okay, so back to the initial question. I know we trailed off a little bit. Was the SP mirror advice, or just SP advice in general?
Yeah, for sure. So first things first, try to have that power. If you open with a power spray and a call your set, just spray the Uxie and just hold. If they don't play a Uxie, don't play your spray. The other really big thing is just like knowing when to break your Cyrus chain. So like don't just Cyrus for Cyrus all the time. Sometimes it's useful to have a Cyrus left in your deck. Another big thing, like you just don't want to run out of juice, right? Which leads me to the next thing is getting a Uxie level X on board at any point in the game is gold. It rarely ever gets targeted. You get a free airmail, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's literally airmail. Yeah.
Literally every turn, but that's so broken in this format. Like it's way more broken than what you think. And you got to go for the Garchomps. I mean, that's pretty much like a given. But and like I said earlier, don't stress about getting the first prize card. Focus more on getting your energies on the right guys or having the right resources in hand in order to win the long game. So
the gist of what you're saying, from what I'm picking up, is that it's a lot about resource control and knowing that these are the resources that I have in the deck and this is the board position, and you have to know what resources you have access to be able to take a game.
It's honestly entirely resource based.
I feel like that's a lot of the format though too. Like the format is very defined around like, do you have the resources in your deck to handle this, or did you blow them early because you're a bad player, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And even sometimes like that could be the right call. It's just blowing your gas early and you're just like, yeah, you're like, I'm just going to be super aggressive, right? And that wins games too, right? Don't get me wrong. I mean, if you see your opponent has like a weak start, capitalize on it, like bang them out.
For sure. But I guess that's one of the like defining aspects of you as a top player is you know the distinction between when you need to go in and when you need to be conservative with your resources.
Yes, that's definitely one of the selling points.
Okay, so we're going to talk about 2011 for a little bit. So just for a second, so you top 8'd in 2011, solid finish with Yanmega Zone, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we were talking a little bit before, and you were talking about some spice that you played in the deck. What you played a couple spicy techs that I actually really liked. Do you want to talk about those?
Yeah, that deck was wild. So so in Canada here we got legal weed, and the day that we were building that deck, sorry for your viewers, I know this is G-rated, but basically my friend got absolutely baked out of his mind, and he came into the room and whipped a plus power at me, and he was like, play this in your deck.
Oh my god.
And I was like, all right, I'm in it.
You gotta trust it, bro. You gotta trust it.
Yo, if I didn't put the plus power in, I thought he was gonna beat the crap out of me, so I was like, all right, I'm gonna put the plus power in. So, and he just like, he was so stoned, but he was talking some like wisdom, and he was like, this is like my buddy Tyler from New York, and this guy was like, Jacob, like you can hit the Quilavas, bro, you can hit 80 on random stuff, bro, it's 80 damage, just because like 70 from the Omega plus the 10. He's like, and you can junk arm, bro, 90 damage, and I was like, this is insane.
Literally disgusting.
No, it was so filthy. And then like Zach starts coming at me with all this like weird janky changes. He's like, Jay, play 3 Magnemite and 4 Magnezone.
I love that too. That's a really interesting part about your list. Why did you play that line like that?
It was easier to search out the Magnemites than to search out the Magnezones.
Right.
So we figured if you could draw the Magnezone, it would be more optimal.
Especially when it's like your consistency crutch.
Exactly. Like the goal of the deck was like to use Pokegear to get Collector.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you could just grab a Magnemite, and then if you already have the zone in your hand, all you're missing is the candy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Right.
So that was most of the spice. The other spice that you were talking about was the super scoop up. Do you want to just touch on that for a second?
Oh yeah, we still got more spice to go on.
Oh, there's more spice.
There's more spice. The super scoop up was so zesty. I mean, being able to pick up a Yanmega with like no energy attached to it and just like heal up basically was nuts.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since in like most mirror matches it would just be like snipe 40, and the right, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, Yanmega's got 110 HP, right?
Yeah, so it's 1 linear attack plus 170 damage attack from a Yanmega finishes it off, right? So I mean, that was massive. So the biggest thing was just like being able to heal up, and like in random matchups it was really strong. Like against stage 1s, being able to use super scoop up was just great.
It's so interesting that just like, yo, play this plus power, bro. I'm baked as heck right now, but this is a busted card.
Yeah, that was literally it, man. He was so baked. But, like, it wasn't just that. It was just that I played 4 copies of Junk Arm, and, like, just being able to reuse them, it's like you're playing 5 plus power. You can play 5 super scoop ups. It was just, like, insane, and I think it was underutilized.
And you see a plethora of options with that because you have Magnezone have those cards in your hand. So, like, if you have 2 Junk Arms, you can use that plus power 3 times if that's something that you need to do.
Exactly, and you can just hit these numbers that you would never be able to hit before, and people, it was so unexpected, and people had never saw it that I just stole wins out of nowhere.
Right.
Like the deck, literally, it was the easiest run to top 8. It was like cakewalked. Not trying to like insult the opponents I played against. It was just like the deck innovation was ahead of its time. It was crazy, and I played the Absol, which was also spicy.
That's definitely
so
spicy.
that like
Absol Prime, right?
Yeah, Absol Prime. So if my opponent went, if I went first, I could free retreat with the Yanma into the Absol turn 1.
Absol, every time your opponent benches a Pokemon, it takes 2, just for those that don't know what Absol does. So yeah, definitely a really spicy list. I did like that list a lot.
Yeah, it was honestly like groundbreaking. I remember like I had all this clout from winning Worlds the previous year, and then like all these masters came up to me and they saw the deck and they were like, "This is so wild! Like, oh my god!"
Spicy
they
list.
They were like, "This kid's easy cakewalk to top 8."
Crispy boys.
Crispy boys.
Okay, so that's pretty much all the questions I have for you. There's one last one though, and I asked this to everyone that I interview. If you had advice for someone that's looking to become better at Pokemon, what advice would you give them?
Ooh, the biggest thing for me, my answer changes on this like throughout time, and I think the biggest one right now is that you really can't get beat up with yourself. I mean, this right now in 2020. We're playing the game, like I'm playing on PTCGO like yesterday, and I'm like, I lost this like online freaking tournament that I was playing in, and I got so pissed. Like I was beyond pissed.
Did you misplay?
And, like I'm sure I did. I totally did at some point. But like I like went 3-3 in this tournament. I was like, oh, I'm so salty, and I like kind of like took a look back on myself, and I'm like, oh, I'm like, would 2010 Jay feel this way? I'm like, would 2015 Jay feel this way? And you kind of be like, do you respect yourself for feeling this saltiness? So like, you really can't beat yourself up over the game now, because now I feel like there's just so much variance in RNG. There's varying levels you can get mad at yourself for, and I feel like the biggest thing you need to do is own up to any misplays you make. And if the cards just weren't in your hand, they just weren't in your hand. You just got toasted, you know? Right.
But knowing the difference between, oh, wow, my prizes are bad, or I drew bad, and like using that as a crutch, using that as, oh, even though I misplayed, like I'm blaming this on my prizes. I feel like that's a crutch that a lot of mediocre and bad players use. Is they're like, oh, my prizes were bad, or I didn't draw the cards that I needed. And it's like, well, did you use all your resources optimally that game? Or like, did you misplay at all? Like, was there anything that you could do? Because you can't control your prizes and you can't control what cards you draw, but you can only control the deck that you play and the choices that you make with the deck.
Exactly, and like while I understand that like RNG is always going to be frustrating from time to time, I mean, there's no sense in like being salty for the next 2 hours over it.
Right.
You know, you got to get over it as quick as possible. Otherwise, your head's not in the game for the next round. You're not at your overall happiness. And I mean, like at the end of the day, you're really playing this game to not only you have to know whether or not you just enjoy winning or whether you enjoy just playing the Pokemon TCG. And if you like both, that's fine. But you have to be knowledgeable and self-aware.
That's really solid advice. Okay, well, thanks so much for coming on, Jay. Do you have any shout outs or do you have any places people can find you at?
Bro, 100%. Obviously, shout out the Familia, shout out Zach for always being a big mentor to me in the game. Shout out my girlfriend, Rochelle. Shout out my roommate, Derek, the homies. You know what it is. They always keep me going.
Shout out Canada.
Well,
Canada gang.
Shout out Canadaddies. Shout out Kabir Virgie. Shout out
Kabir.
Shout out my boy. I just unblocked him on Facebook today. Shout out Drew Allen.
Oh, yeah, again.
For always being Supreme Canadaddy. To all my friends in the game that have been super tight with me. And just for everyone for being so great, especially during the times that I've taken a year off and everyone just reaches out to me. It's always been great. You can always find me on social media. So you can find me on Instagram at DieselHarleyXO. You can find me on Facebook, Jay Lesage. You can find me on TikTok at Diesel Harley.
You got a TikTok account?
Yeah, I got a TikTok account.
Oh, shit.
I got 12K followers and only like 6 videos.
Wow.
Let's go.
I've actually seen both of the TikToks you put out. I feel like TikTok is so interesting because it's like it's media and so much of it is mediocre, but like the gems that you find they are really good. And the first one, the sandwich one that you have is actually kind of funny. I do like that one.
I do like the sandwich one. The sandwich one's pretty funny. But yeah, so go check me out on TikTok, guys. Go plug me that. And yeah, you can catch me at the Limitless Q1 coming up this weekend.
Awesome. Well, this has been our interview with Jay Lesage. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.